where does this process kick in where you're designing like the iconography for the books?
I don't remember exactly at what point I first read a draft, but I remember when he started talking about it, and he and I were dreaming up sigil designs prior to me even reading the book, actually, because we were spitballing this new thing he was working on. And I remember really clearly we were both up in Seattle, and so it must have been on a Christmas break during college. And we were up at Pike Place Market. We were walking around having coffee, and we stepped into a bookstore because we were like so excited about these sigils. And he just told me about the caste system and this whole idea for the book. And I was just like, my mind was immediately blown. And he pulled out a napkin, and we start sketching on it. And he drew an incredibly terrible drawing of the alchemical symbol for iron, which is what the red sigil is based on. And he was like, all of the caste system is going to be based off of these alchemical symbols. Excuse me. And so that was the beginning of it. I immediately was like, well, that's a terrible drawing, and we can fix it and do this better and change this and do that. And he's like, oh my God, that's really cool. And then it sort of, we went on to chat about other things and so on. But then eventually when the book was published, he went to bat for me, and he fought for me to be brought in as the official designer when working with Random House. And I'm sure that was quite a battle because they don't know me from Adam. And at the time, I think I wasn't even 21 yet. I mean, I was just out of college. I barely even had a website, and I was working as a graphic designer, but at my first ever job. And so these guys were probably like, who's this kid? And like, this author won't, like, let us use our people. Like, we've got good people. Why won't you let us use them? And he fought for me and said, no, this is the person who I want to design the stuff. And we got to have an absolute blast kicking around ideas for that first launch. I mean, I spent probably 3 months designing the house sigils, the color sigils, the Sons of Aries, tag. That was all part of the first book launch because Random House wanted to do this massive marketing blitz, and they basically ended up designing all this stuff that wasn't even in the book. Like they paid me to design all the sigils, but the sigils weren't visualized in the actual book, and they ended up on this website, and they basically, which now in the future here, I'm still kicking myself for letting them do this, but they put out like high-res versions of all of this stuff on the internet because they were like, we want people to put it everywhere. We want it all over the world. And it totally worked as a marketing blitz, but now I have, tiny little rip-off shops in Indonesia selling versions of stuff that, we're trying to use to support our business. So it was a really amazing couple of months. I had so much fun calling Pierce up and being like, hey, what about if we did this? And how about if we do that? And just absolutely nerding out over the initial process of the house sigils and the color sigils especially.
Well, as a recipient of those high-res photos, I appreciate it because I made some really badass cookies last year that were sigil cookies.
Yes.
So thank you so much for that. One other thing you said, something interesting that I've noticed about Pierce is he really kind of favors his inner circle. You see this with his sister being in charge of Sons of Aries. His roommate's little brother gets the art gig. And you gave a little bit, but I wonder if you could just dive in a little bit more. What were your chops back then? What did Pierce see outside of just your conversation that made him fight for you?
I want to say it was sort of a combination of two things. First, it was the fact that he's a very loyal person. He's one of the most loyal people that I know, and we'd had so many conversations about this, and I'd been dreaming up ideas and, doing this unpaid and, sort of just kicking shit around creatively with him around the Red Rising world. And so when it came time to actually have resources to hire somebody, he immediately was like, no, I've already been working with somebody to do this. I want them to, now actually be paid for that work. But I think the biggest part of it, because a lot of it was still undesigned, was the fact that we really connected creatively. There was immediately a sort of, I don't know what you call it, but a bit of a mind melding creatively around, what this world was, where he would be like, oh, and we could do this. And then I'd immediately be able to envision it and respond to it and create the thing that he saw in his head. And from my standpoint, he's an incredibly easy person to work with because, he writes like he's a screenwriter, even in his books. I mean, the way he writes is so descriptive. And when you talk to him about, something that's not described in the books that he wants you to design, he has the entire backstory and why it exists and who this person is and why this happened. And there's like 27 layers that are deeper than the reader ever gets that are all in his head. And he'll just download those and you're sitting there like, I'm just sitting here with a pile of gold that if I fuck this up, I'm the worst artist that ever existed because it's just been handed to you on a silver platter. And so, it's pretty mind blowing, honestly, to look back on like this, that whole first interaction before it was real, because now, obviously there's 5 books and fans all over the world who love it, but it really was one of those moments where you sort of, I felt it was a bit fated, I guess, to have that connection and to come together around it, because it just sort of happened seamlessly and was an absolute joy of a creative process for